But don't you think that it would have made more sense to stick it out for another election cycle first as a selectman? Just to get a little bit more under your belt before you stepped into this.
So how it kind of lined up, Gino, is that's something I really thought about. But as far as state rep seats, these only come up every 10 years or so. So you'll see in kind of the field of candidates, it's very hard to run against an incumbent, and that even in local town politics, it's very hard to run against an incumbent. And I think Tim has done a great job, and I want to continue to see his work done. And I really think both the Vineyard and the Island, Nantucket, have received a lot of positive outcomes because Tim's been our representative, and I want to make sure someone from the Islands is there, and I think I'm a great candidate for that.
So tell me what Tim's job is, and tell me what he was able to do.
So what Tim does essentially is, he's one of 160 state representatives across the state, and they vote on the $40 million state budget that's drafted by proposed by the governor.
Only 40 million?
40 billion. Sorry, Gino. Got my zeros wrong.
You got it. 40 billion. Okay.
And then then there's 30 senators. So he works to draft the laws and the budget of the state. At the same time, however, there's lots of little things that come up for people in the district. Regulations as far as a 30-year buyback period for sewer. Kind of extending that out. That was something Tim worked on. When it comes to affordable housing, instead of 100% AMI for the cap on affordability to get into a covenant home, Tim raised that up to 150 because he understood that even people on Nantucket make more, and the same goes on the Vineyard and Falmouth, but it still doesn't mean that they can afford a place to live. So he kind of adjusted those numbers through home rule petitions. So there's a lot of work working with the community to say, hey, what do you need? What are your needs? Let's get them passed through town meeting in an appropriate way, and then going to the state and saying, how does this integrate into the rest of the state and the state's needs to move forward and deal with housing and other issues? So that's kind of his job.
Is that how you see yourself? You're just going to kind of take over where Tim left off, or how are you going to?
I think I'm going to do things a little differently than Tim has. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to play out. One of them is I think I'm going to spend a lot more time living in Falmouth. Tim lived up in Boston. And that worked out really well for him, but I think I'm going to be a little bit of a different legislature than he is. I think I might be a little more progressively minded than Tim is, but I think we share a lot of the values in trying to work across the aisle to get things done.
In leaving your job as a selectman and giving up that progressive approach that you claim you have, don't you feel like maybe you're letting some of your people that really were looking forward to the way you were conducting yourself down a little bit? Obviously it's not going to be the same board without you.
No.
So it has to, I have to ask that question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Gino. I think, I try to inspire people to get involved, to be on boards, try to get them engaged, try to encourage them to run for seats, to put their name in the hat to get appointed to the board. There's kind of a process of getting appointed to the finance committee or the capital projects committee before you might run for an office. And I think the biggest thing I've seen is that it's really just challenging economically for young people. If you're retired, you can afford to be a board member. But what we need, when you look at higher elected offices, all the staffers are under the age of 40. They're under the age of 30. They're smart kids right out of school. They're working hard. They're coming up with great policy for our country. They're not figureheads. And if we want to get more young people involved, we got to change the economic structure so that young people can work and also take the time to be elected officials. So it is.
What are you saying?
What I'm saying, Gino, is that I would have loved to keep running, but I think there's also a place for more young people to keep getting involved, and we shouldn't, our society...
So we should pay selectmen more money than they get?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, why didn't you do that?
Well,
why didn't you try to make that happen?
I don't think that's my place as an elected official. That should come from the people. That should come from Nantucketers.
Let's talk locally. What else? Now that you're out, now you can tell it like it is. Your thoughts on the board, your thoughts on the way things progressed. what you'd like to see happen. What do we need to do more of? That go for it. Just let it out. Tell me what's up.
I think as far as how I see the island going, we've done a great job at being a tourist community, attracting people to come here. We have a strong economy. What I think we haven't done really well is made the economic game work for everybody. So every year you'll hear stories about people being forced to move off island who have been long time people on the island because they can't afford to live here. And I don't think we should continue to operate that way, and I think we've just been slow in realizing how big of a problem affordable housing is and workforce housing for people. Aspen ran into this problem 25 years ago, and they ended up building a lot of housing, but they lost a huge amount of their community first. And so I think we're a little bit behind the curve as far as a tourist community that needs to build housing, but that's something I'd really encourage Nantucketers to get behind. And I think with the Housing Bank article, home rule petition that was passed at town meeting, the tiny house article, all these different tools in the toolbox will help. As far as the board goes as a whole, I think when I was on the board, I was interested in having our workshops, ways of us to work better with as an organization. A lot of people say, oh, so-and-so, they don't understand, or they're corrupt, and it's like, no, it's really the system of how it works that doesn't really help out people. And so I try to think about how do you improve that system and how the selectmen operate as a team, as a group of leaders trying to get things done.
So how do they improve?
How is the board improved?
Yeah.
I think the workshops have helped a lot. Okay. Just having open conversation. When when you're forced to vote on something, it's hard to have a candid conversation when you're underneath the microphone. It's easier to when you're saying, all right, we're not going to vote tonight. We're going to just talk. It gives the chance, because we don't go out and play golf together or go out and go fishing together. Gino, that's you can't break the open meeting law.
Right.
So government's at a bad place when it comes to that, which is good. It's important to have those laws in place to keep corruption down, but it inhibits the ability for good teams to form and people to solve problems. We don't want governments that just are constantly fighting against each other. We want them to be working for us. But when it comes to issues, Gino, like back to your question, I think the dump is a huge issue that the town hasn't really faced. I've been talking about it for 3 years. We need to totally rethink how we run our dump. There's a lot of conversation about the island home and how it operates, at a loss. Well, or it gets subsidized.
Why don't we just privatize everything?
Well, I think the dump is already kind of privatized, and that's the worst part about it. It's the model's really terrible. We mix compost into the digester, with plastic, and then people have to pick up this compost that, I don't think is healthy to be putting on your lawn. That's just me. I'm not an expert, but I've never used it, and I don't encourage people to use it. That's disgusting.
We tested the water, right? Why don't we test the compost?
Well,
in the process of having,
that's a great.
We should know that
we should
data.
know that. We should see that. We should know that. We know the water quality isn't great.
So, but what do we got to do with the dump then, Tobias?
Well, there's a contract with Waste Option that ends in about 7 years, and so I think there's a great opportunity now over the next 7 years to say, okay, let's get rid of this digester that's costing us a ton of money. Costs, Gino, get this.
The energy the
energy that uses, the amount of waste we're generating is just ridiculous. I remember, Gino, when I was like, 5 or 6, you go to the dump, it was a hole, remember?
Yep.
And now it's a mountain. That's plastics. We should be banning plastic water bottles. We should think really collectively about all this waste we've created.
Okay.
We should think strategically.
We have to ban plastic at some point.
We have to ban plastic. It's just crazy.
We're just holding off.
I'm gonna
pull over here.
Yeah, we're just filling our ponds, our whole community with this huge mountain of trash, and it's not helping anybody.
So if we got rid of plastic,
Well, we can use them for medical devices. That's a great place for plastic gloves and whatnot. But we don't need them to wrap sandwiches in. We wrap fish in wax paper, and it works just fine.
Yes. Okay, so that's one thing. What about, why don't we have wind turbines generating electricity on these semi-industrial plants that we have? The sewer treatment plant, the dump.
Well, I mean,
we use it we offset it for the high school.
Yeah, I think for the sewer treatment plant, there's talk of putting solar there just because of how it's located and the sand and that moving around. I think, solar's a good location for that.
Why not both?
Well,
I mean, all that wind we get here. I mean, it would just benefit. Don't we have to do our part in global warming too?
I think we totally should, Gino. I've been pushing on behalf of a piece of legislation that would help for long-term municipal contracts for the deep water project south of the vineyard and the island. I think there's a greater scale, an economy of scale to do there, and I think solar works great on people's houses, and it's something that it doesn't have the side effects that have been associated with turbines being close to people. I think for industrial sites they make sense. But wind turbines make sense when they're really big. Solar makes sense, if you got a couple panels or not. It makes a lot of sense for you. And Massachusetts is the best place for solar as far as the high cost of electricity. Mm-hmm. You're saving a lot of money by putting in solar, even though it's not super sunny here.
All right, so here you are. You're a mason. That's what you do to make a living.
Yep. Fixing a chimney.
If you become a state rep, what kind of money are you going to make doing that?
All state reps across the state make about $60,000 a year.
Okay.
So I will, quit working as a mason and work full time as a state representative.
And where will you live? Will you live on the Cape?
So I think just in talking to Tim about it and a couple different folks, I think what makes the most sense, because it's a really tricky district, Gino, is to live in Falmouth. Have an apartment in Falmouth and that be my home base. I'll always have a place to stay on Nantucket.
Yeah.
Because I got family and have a little.
Can you
room
live
there.
on 60,000? I guess you could.
Yeah. I think that's totally.
You wouldn't want to. Could you still work? Could you still do masonry work?
Yeah.
If you wanted to.
Yeah, for the old ladies and then their chimney cleaned or
Okay.
something fixed, I'd always be there, Gino. You know how it is.
So how do you see yourself then, Tobias? How old are you?
I'm 27.
You're so young. It's great that's what I love, that you're out there as a young person, starting off and doing public service. Does it ever bother you maybe in a small town like this it's not as mean, but it could get mean. It can get negative. And do you have a thick enough skin for that? I mean, have you had to deal with any of that?
So when I was first elected, Gino, I quickly realized there was a lot of people who, not a lot, there were some people who always wanted to complain. And my dad never liked complaining, and I don't like it. I don't think it's an effective way of communicating. We all are busy, and there's not time for that. And so when people would email me and be complaining about something, or call me and complain about something, I'd say, what are your solutions? I hear you, but what are your solutions? Can you write back to me with you're obviously talking to me about this, you know more about this than I do. Educate me. Don't whine about something. Get involved in the project. And so I think by having that way of communicating to people has enabled me to focus on solving problems and not have to deal with people, complaining about things and getting them engaged, because their problems are real. It's about how do you help people get through them in a positive manner.
And what would you tell someone who's younger, who's thinking that maybe they would like to try public service? I mean, so few young people do it today. It seems that way.
Yeah.
They're not involved. They're certainly not voting.
Yeah. There's I think definitely more young people, vote than we think do. We're seeing we've seen more, I've heard from people that we see a lot more young people at town meeting over the last 3 years, so I think we're moving in that direction. It's very hard economically for young people here. We're not as financially stable, so it's harder to get engaged, so we have to think about the economics of getting young people involved. Young people are playing at a disadvantage in those rings. So I think there's...
as a voter, though, yes, I understand that.
Yeah. But as
But
far
as a voter, as far as voting and making a difference in your community,
well, I
we need more young people to be involved.
yeah, and
Have more say.
And it's not to say that young people aren't involved. I just think in the realm of politics or policy leadership, they haven't been involved as much, and that'll, I think, come as we encourage them more and show them the benefits of running. And I always tell people, like, there's big problems facing the world. We're raising the bulkheads on Nantucket. The water is coming up in the downtown. We all know that.
It's coming.
It's coming. We have major problems as far as sea level rise, ocean acidification here on the island, energy policy, housing. So many big problems. And for me, I can't just put my head in the sand and be like, "Oh, this is a messed up world."
You really feel like you want to be involved. I mean,
I feel hopeful about the world, and I think people, you never solved anything by being negative. And I think when people have hope and they put their minds to solving problems, they solve problems. Think of the French beginning of World War II. War starts up, the Germans take it over in 3 weeks, and must have felt like the end of the world. 4 years later, France is liberated. Look at France now. It's a beautiful country. Who would have thought that it would have come back? But it has. So we look out at the world and go, "Oh, the sea level's rising. This is so brutal. We're seeing a huge amount of species die off." And I go, "Okay, so what do we do to manage our fisheries better, to make sure we're protecting those species? How do we integrate with that? How do we get people excited about solving problems?" And so, that's why I encourage people to get involved in it, because it's like, you can make money and donate to different causes, but if you get involved, you're actually in a position of power where you can solve problems and get people excited about that. And that's really what a community's about. It's about working together to solve problems. That's fun.
What's going to happen with the fish store?
The fish store is going to stay open. Sharon, who's been working for my dad for 15 years or so, she's going to keep running it.
Keep the name?
Yeah, for now, yeah.
Okay.
Glidden's.
All right. But you're not interested in running the fish business?
No, not necessarily. I've been in...
And the kids and your other brothers and sisters,
yeah,
maybe at some point?
on Daffodil, 3 of us, my sister Becky and Rosemary, and actually Amy as well, was down from Providence, and they were helping, sell fish to people, because we think it's important for people. And I've been cutting fish every other day, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, cut fish before work. So
you still got that trade you can always fall back on too.
Well,
if the politics doesn't work out,
well, my it's not like I'm trying to make politics work out, Gino. It's like I want to make sure we have fish to cut in the future.
There you go.